Joining me is former Tiger Gordy Rush outside the LSU locker room, and obviously that is a locker room that is struggling right now. I mean, you and I have never been a part of an LSU 7 overtime anything.
It's as disappointing a game as I've been around, not only because that LSU lost a game, and they lost a game, and was it 7 overtimes? I lost track. Okay. Yeah. That many overtimes. But, you know, there were just so many opportunities for LSU to close this thing out. So many calls that, look, seem to go against LSU. I'm not going to sit here and harp on that till I get a chance to see the replays, what I saw on the field. And, you know, I mean, you're just a little bit disappointment, a little bit disbelief. And, you know, I guess the best thing about this is finally you got your rivalry with LSU and Texas A&M, because I can't wait for these people to come back to Tiger Stadium a year from now and a series that really has been, you know, obviously lopsided and not that physical. But, you know, disappointing loss, but, you know, 9-3 season, a lot better than a lot of people expected.
Coach O in the press conference was said a number of times he didn't think that there should have been 1 second put back on the clock at the end of regulation. He thought it was a fumble and by the wide receiver in the first overtime. He thought he had made a move. I mean, there were just so many calls that went against LSU. It's unbelievable.
You know, and I've got to go back to you know, those coaches are in the SEC offices with Steve Shaw, and I'm only there for a day, right? So I'm barely, you know, hardly an expert. But from my understanding of the rule, if the ball is set, and, you know, once the ball's set, you can't spike the ball within 3 seconds. And that's what I believe these coaches have been told. But we're going to have to go, again, there's so much film to go back and look at. The one to me was the Sternberger fumble. I was right there in the end zone. He caught the football and made a football move and turned his body. His back was towards me. He was facing it. And then the ball came out, and they won't even look at it. That's, you know, but it is what it is, man. You know, it's a football game, and tough loss for LSU.
Coach O explained in the press conference that he's in the ear of the officials. The officials are saying, "Don't call a timeout. We reviewed it, and it's, you know, the fourth down's a first down, or it's a fumble." There's so many plays here, but I'll say this. LSU, for the record, had 3 offensive plays inside the 8-yard line. If they score, game's over. And they had 3 defensive plays. If they get a stop, the game's over. 0 for 6. A lot of woulda, coulda, shouldas.
I mean, I don't even want to go there, Ronnie. I mean, it would take us a week to go back and look at really both sides have the opportunities. But, you know, again, LSU had a chance to close this thing out in regulation. They don't get it done. And give A&M credit. They played gutty, and they got after it tonight.
Talking about A&M, I mean, this is a different-looking A&M team. There's no question under Jimbo Fisher they're doing things differently.
Well, much more physical, and they, you know, especially in the first half. And then I thought LSU matched their physicality in the second half, and defensively did a great job. You know, they're not giving the short field on the Jonathan Giles fumble. We might be looking at a different game. But, you know, LSU had chances to make plays, didn't make plays when they could have. Didn't win the football game.
You know, this is an LSU team that going into the offseason, it seems like the problems they had the first game were the same problems they had the last game. It's particularly offensive line. I mean, it was a struggle all day for Joe Burrow. It was amazing he kind of did as good as he did.
Well, I think that when they threw the ball quick and on first down and got ahead of the chains, they were fine. What happened to them, if they got behind the chains, they struggle in protection. And when there's a chance of run pass, Burrow's more comfortable, I think, from the pistol shotgun, and he's more comfortable from that quicker 3-step RPO type game than the 5-step, the 7-step. You know, we saw him do a play action 7-step. They ran a corner blitz. He never saw it coming. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, look, when you look at this LSU offense this year, there's not a whole lot of elite, in my opinion, you know, elite talent. I think Jefferson plays in the league. We'll see if Chase and Marshall get there. You know, I think Morrow will probably have a nice career. But what they were able to do with this group and win 9 football games has been impressive, right? You didn't have elite tailbacks, and you got some people to overachieve. And obviously, you struggled on the offensive line. So there's a lot to clean up for next season.
You mentioned 9 wins, not 10. Is it 9.5? I mean, when you lose in 7 overtime. Look, LSU in 2007 really didn't get penalized for losing in triple overtime. So it's almost like it shouldn't count as a loss if you lose in 7, right?
The great thing is that I'm sure that nobody else is playing it. All the committee got to watch this thing. At least the committee's human, right? And some of them may say, hey, you know, I mean, like, give LSU a half a win for this game, and maybe it helps them out if there's an opening in the New Year's Six Bowl.
You got a projection on a bowl?
Not now. I mean, not after tonight. Maybe they sneak into New Year's Six. I've got to see. You'll have to see what happens next week. I think that affects it more than anything. If not, you're probably looking at a Florida Bowl. Not Orlando. I think LSU's had enough Orlando. Orlando's had enough LSU. You know, and I hate to say Tampa. You know, Tampa against a Northwestern, Wisconsin, Michigan State for me would probably be a disappointing end to what's been a really nice season.
Yeah, Florida winning today probably didn't help LSU's chances. To be a long shot. All right, Gordy, this was one that you'll be thinking about for a long, long time.
Yeah, I will, and when I get home, I'll be able to go home get some donuts because the donut shop will just be opening.
Right.
I'll bring some to Victor.
There's some great Shipleys on the way to Houston, by the way. All right, let's go back to the studio in New Orleans.